In your vast experience, Vicky, of dealing with, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of researchers by now, all around the world, and from talking with them, what do you identify as being their greatest concerns when it comes to mobility?
So I've been thinking about that long and hard, and I think that I would like to talk about 4 concerns that I have come across with, and they have kept coming up in the past years. Number 1 is especially has to do with more experienced researchers and the length of an overseas stay. So if I'm talking to researchers, including faculty, about the 2 to 5 year fellowships or grants in Europe, they seem to be reluctant to leave their position at the home institution because obviously of the fear of losing it. So this is number 1. Number 2, as a concern, writing a European grant versus writing a North American grant can be and is different. So that is another concern that I came across with. Number 3, practical issues connected to mobility, such as language barrier, visas, moving with a family member, any other practical issue that you could think of that really has to do with relocating from one place to another can be a concern. And then last but not least, number 4, sometimes, as I say in quotes, as simple as getting out of your comfort zone to travel to a new or a different country.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think, again, having identified those sort of barriers, what sort of strategies do you see them put in place to overcome those barriers, if any? Like what did the successful networkers of the world look like?
So
aside from the 2 of you.
So the good thing is that I have at least part of the solution to all of the concerns that I have identified and I have talked about. So if you go back to number 1, which was about the long-term stays for more experienced researchers, and obviously we've heard it already in the previous interaction, there are quite a number of options through either EU or national funding to conduct short-term mobilities, which can last for days, weeks, or months, and they don't necessarily have to last for years. And I would like to mention a couple of examples here, if I may. One of the examples that I like to talk about is the program called Erasmus+, which enables undergraduate, graduate, postdocs, also faculty, to do short-term mobility exchanges between Europe and another country, be it US, Canada, or anywhere else in the world. Then within the Mercury, for example, there is an action called RISE, which stands for the Research Innovation Staff Exchange. So within the consortium of the partners of the RISE project, there can be short-term mobilities as well, the exchanges of the partners for weeks or months. And then another platform that I can think about and involves individual grants or researchers is something called the European Research Council Implementing Arrangements. So these implementing arrangements are in place with some of the countries around the world. So because I'm based here in North America, I know that with both US and Canada, these ERC implementing arrangements are in place. And these allow, through the local funding agencies, some of the really good researchers to go and spend a couple of months with the PI of the ERC team. And this is a wonderful experience because it really allows that person who's perhaps not yet ready to apply for an ERC grant, but can go and spend some time with the PI and learn a lot more about the running of the project itself. Then I would move to concern number 2, which was writing a European versus a North American grant. There are many supporting mechanisms in place that really help researchers explain the European research terminology and also steps how to apply for a particular fellowship or grant. And here I would also like to mention a couple of resources and a couple of helping mechanisms that you could turn to. if you are about to apply for a Marie Curie or European Research Council grant, um, there is a vast network of something called the NCPs, the National Contact Point Network, based in every single European country. And these people are really trained to give you that helping hand, to go through the proposal with you, to share some hints and tricks on how to successful proposal, the do's and don'ts. So you can really rely on the help of these people to help you go through the proposal. Then we have here in the US, we have something called the Horizon 2020 Legal and Financial NCP, the National Contact Point. That would be important for those people that are planning to apply for bigger collaborative projects under Horizon 2020 and have some questions regarding how to set up a consortium and what is involved, especially from the perspective of the legal and financial issues. Then there's another platform that I would like to mention here that I think is very useful. Was created by a project called Bilat USA 4.0, and it's called Wiki. It's WIKI, like Wikipedia, and it's basically a glossary of the terminology in between the US and European jargon, as Brussels jargon, as we call it. So basically, they really created. It's online. It's accessible to everyone. You can really click on it, open it, and see the differences between the actual words. If in Europe it's called a proposal, how it's called in the US, or if it's called in Europe tender, the equivalent of that within the US terminology. So that's a very good resource. In Canada, there is a Marie Curie Regional NCP, but only based in Quebec. So that is so far only for the province. And then I can't forget about the two very important resources, and that's the Marie Curie North America chapter, which has been wonderful, I think, since you guys have set up everything and the chapters and the chairs. I think that a lot of people have benefited by really reaching out to you and learning about either way, both way mobility, either going to Europe or coming to North America. And of course, if people want to ask any specific questions, they can come back to us. And if I don't know the answer, I will try to find the person that knows the answer. Then moving right along with the third concern, with the practical issues connected to mobility. Again, I think I have an answer for that, which is the Euraccess Service Centers Network in Europe. I don't know if you guys have heard of it or if you know a little bit about those networks, but I think they were really set up to help relocate to help with the relocation of researchers and their family members. So they really help with the practical information one might have, including questions on visas, work permits, social security, healthcare, accommodation, taxes, for example, where a spouse can look for jobs, where can the children go to school. So a lot of practical information that you might be scared of, or you just don't know because of that barrier that you feel. And all these information, all these services are completely free of charge. And you can find the website online through the euraccess.org big website. So there is a lot of information out there. And then last but not least, the fourth concern, as I mentioned, the comfort zone, which is very interesting because especially here when I talk to researchers in the US and Canada, you know, I come across with this quite a bit. If there are European researchers that are based here, it's not really a question anymore. It's not really a concern, but mainly for the researchers, the local researchers. I see a big difference in between those that have had the opportunity to travel to Europe before, for example, a student or tourist, and those that have never left their home country before. Obviously, the former group would be more willing to be mobile at a later stage of their career because they already had that connection before, but it's not the case with the second group. So what I would say to those people, what I would advise to them, and what I've also heard other people advising them, is to really go and do like a short study abroad visit, or for more experienced researchers, there are so many different visiting scholar fellowships that you can do for a couple of days, or even if it's only a guided tour as a tourist for a short period of time. If it's Europe or any other country outside of your comfort zone that you've never been to, and to really get that first feeling of that space, and to get your feet wet, as we say, because then I believe, in my opinion, once you go to Europe and you get the appetite and you learn a little bit about the continent, you will want to go back.
Thank you, Vicky, for that wonderful contribution. I think you gave a lot of options to our fellows, a very wide area of options for networking. Is this information centralized somewhere? Would it be under the umbrella of your Access, the website, or do they need to go to these different places to find more information on the different tools that you've suggested?
Yeah, so I can put together a list of all the resources for this particular webinar. So I can definitely then, share it with you, and you can share it with all the people. I don't think, to be honest, there is one particular website where you can go and find everything. I think I should launch my own to have everything.
That's a great idea.
Under that umbrella, but so far it would be more of a personal basis conversation, and then directing people to the right websites and the things that they need.
Thank you very much to the both of you. If you are okay with it, I would now give the floor to Boston. Clara and Christina, are you there?
Hello, yeah, we're here.
Hi. Okay, so I'm going to give you the floor now to moderate the discussion from the fellows who are there. Hi, Dimitra.
Hello.
So Dimitra is a member of the management team of the North American chapter based in Boston at MIT. The floor is all yours.
Great, thank you. Thank you all both for your inputs and the very interesting questions. We're a small number of 4 people here, but we came up with, I think, some really interesting questions for you both. So first, we would like to ask you, what are the differences between preparing an EU grant versus a grant in North America, based on the experience of the fellows that you have both interacted with?
I guess it's for Victoria. No, that's not for me.
I think I mentioned in one of my responses that that's one of the concerns that mobile researchers have, the writing the grant, the European and an American. I think one of the, it really depends on what kind of grant, because it's so different also within the EU's perspective. You can have a grant that's funded by the European Commission under Horizon 2020, such as the Marie Curie and the ERC, and then you have grants that are funded through national research councils, research agencies, by member states and associated countries. If it's a grant for short term, if it's a grant for individual fellows, if it's a grant for collaboration. So all of them are very, I think, are very different. But understanding the terminology that I talked about, it's very important. So you're going to understand exactly what that word, although we are, speaking English, or we are writing in English, perhaps Dr. Setela can actually, say something about that. But sometimes it is different, in terms of how you read and how you write a proposal. Because also within the Marie Curie Individual Fellowship, and you guys can talk about that, there are specific words that are required that you put into the proposal just because the commission likes to see them, and there are some of the key words, or some of the important terminology that you need to include into your proposal in order to really get the attention of the people and have your proposal move on to the next stage.
Do you have to suggest some resources that people could use when preparing a grant, a proposal?
Yes, so I just talked about that quite a bit in my monologue previously. So depending on which way you would like to be applying, because I am promoting opportunities in Europe, so I know a lot more about European structures and European help compared to the North American, but we could also look into that later if you want to. So in terms of the European, if it's the Marie Curie and the ERC, you have the National Contact Point network, you have us, you can ask us questions, we can direct that then to the right people within the European Commission, or we can ask also some of the science counselors that are based here at the different embassies that could perhaps help with then the national funding or the national grants. So yes, there are quite a bit of resources and quite a bit of helping hands. There are a lot of handbooks and a lot of guides that have been written by these national contact points to really help you through your proposal writing.
Thank you for that. We're moving to the next question, which regards the relationships between former supervisors and former colleagues. So one of our fellows is asking, what are the necessary steps to nurture the connections and the relationships between the fellows who have just completed their research appointment with their former supervisors and former colleagues. It's always easier to stay connected with friends, even if you change the country that you live in. But it seems that it's more challenging when it comes to work professional relationships. So we wonder if you might have some input for that.
Actually, I didn't really get the difference, actually, the question. I mean, could you rephrase it maybe once again? What do you mean?
Yeah, so do you think there's a way could there be some necessary steps that one could follow to retain relationships with former supervisors and former colleagues when the appointment is over?
Yeah, well, in the end, we do this quite a lot actually in reality, but it's very hard to give any kind of recipe how to do this. Where you stay linked, you exchange. If you're in the same field, that's ideally try to stick to your. Well, you try to be independent, of course, to some extent from your former supervisor to develop your own ideas. We also try to stay linked to get, let's say, input from these people. It's I think it's a matter of your personal, let's say, degree of interaction, whether you really can maintain this interaction, whether you can convince your former supervisor to stay in touch with you. So I don't have recipes for this, but it's a matter of personal activity, I think.
Do you have any personal experience that maybe you could share and it could prove useful and helpful for our fellows?
Yeah, well, my own supervisor, PhD supervisor, well, he just died after I finished my PhD, so there was no experience in this one, unfortunately. And all the others have been more colleagues on a peer level, so it is not really comparable. I have some colleagues who have been former professors of mine, where I'm now interacting on, let's say, on the same level. We just try to keep this momentum which we started during my earlier career. But this was again trying to, let's say, keep in touch with those people where you think that they have the most relevant information, knowledge, experience for your own career. So this is a matter of, let's say, not really being too pressing, but staying in touch and keeping yourself on the agenda, and maybe ideally with some, let's say, content in terms of what you're doing, so that to keep the interest with the other former supervisors when you stay in a similar field of research.
Thank you for sharing that experience.